that you don't need that many points per game to be able to make it to these super weekends, right? It's only the bottom 4 that don't make it, so you do need to have a bad week. But there has to be 4 teams in there, right? There has to be 4 teams that do not make it through. So you just need to be putting consistently, if you're putting consistent 8 points on the board, you're more than likely going to make it into this next stage of the tournament. I mean, it's tricky, it's difficult to keep that average up, but we see it happen fairly frequently. But if you're 8, you're fairly secure. It's when you start to get a little bit lower than that, that's when the danger starts to creep in, where the fear should really start to affect you.
I think that highlight there, I'm just going to run back to it because I think it is one thing that if you see it in your games or you see it in an esports broadcast, guys, if you see a team just dropping into a shack, you know, that really is a desperation play. And that is realistically for the end game where you want to try and get as many points as possible. I do not like jumping into a shack around like the first 10 minutes because at this level, you're just opening yourself up to get naded, and Enigma Galaxy know exactly what to do in that situation, and the Infinity go down with no fight. There is absolutely no fight in them there. So I did not like that from the Infinity. So I need to keep an eye on them because, you know, I do think this is a good team, but actually at the beginning, you know, can we get the back-to-back victories for China? China's making a really good statement for it so far.
Yeah, they certainly have started well. I mean, as we saw though, Tongjiabao, to an extent, they've made only a few rotations towards the start of the game, right? They got into that position early, they were able to hold it, and they did control the ground around them very well. But there are questions there, you know, is it just because of that circle? We know they're a strong team, but they've managed to prove themselves once. They need to do a little bit more, though, to keep themselves at the top of the tables. Plenty of teams waiting in the wings. And speaking of waiting in the wings, we've got the analyst desk to break it down.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. And yes, I mean, I did say this, and I will correct myself. Maybe I'm the curse, but it's a positive curse. That the Chinese teams might take some time to adjust, going from first person to third person. We also mentioned, hey, they were just playing in PEL, so maybe they need some time off, or maybe it's just to get them ready to go into this event. But to have our top 3 teams at the end of our first match all be from China, I think that's a statement in itself, Max.
Yeah, it's scary for the other team now. Looking at this, the top 3 teams all being STE, you also having Nova, and you also having Tongjiabao. I'm a little bit scared. Know how things are going to be panning out for the entirety of the tournament. So, of course, yeah, that circle that did end up going heavily towards Tongjiabao towards the end, and they played it really well, especially to make sure that no teams would try and contest Potato Hill, because really, Kalaris, Potato Hill is pretty hard to hold on to for the entirety of that game, but they did it really well.
Yeah, they did. Obviously, they had that effectively a 2-2 split across both the west side and east side of Potato Hill. This is very, very important that they do this. You don't want to, as you pointed out, Max, during this game, you don't want to be backfilled on there. It's easy for teams to eventually breach up that spot and then push and kind of divide and conquer those 2 situations. But they were able to hold on to that great. They had STE down towards the south of them that they were most concerned about. But once they know that that threat is not breaching onto that position on Potato Hill, just being able to control the rest of it, very, very nicely done by them.
I think it's a really big statement out of them as well, right? Like, they were the first team into the event from China. This team really, like, I guess, putting other teams through their works, through their courses here, because they finish off with 23 points. They get 8 eliminations, the most in the lobby. But also credit to Nova, because they were down to like 1 player, it feels like, for a large amount of time. But then again, that player was Paraboy, and we know what Paraboy can do.
I mean, he's a mobile game of the year, okay? We need to expect big things from the mobile game of the year. But yeah, but Paraboy, they had that big engage at one point where they got close to, I believe it was MS Chonburi at one point, so they lost a lot of their players because of that. So because it was an uphill battle, the idea for Paraboy was just, we know we're not going to go for the chicken dinner. We just going to survive as long as we possibly can. Getting the second place, despite, as you said, right, Jason, only having Paraboy remaining is a great playstyle. So Nova know when they can't aim for the chicken dinner and just try and rack up as many kills and placement points as possible. This is Nova doing what they do best, which is adapt to the situation and able to get 18 points on this game.
That's the thing as well. You're saying uphill battle. That's the thing that I'm most impressed by. The fact that they have that compound and then are able to survive up that hill is very impressive. It's not easy to be able to get up that hill when you've got the likes of Nigma, as well as I think it was the Xavier's over on that east side, kind of looking in their direction. So yeah, very well done by them.
We can see here our second page, our other 8 teams. I mean, Xavier, as you mentioned, them coming in from Vietnam. Great to see them put up 4 points. I feel like, Max, they were really impressive when we saw them at PMWI, the World Invitational. So it's actually great to see them have a similar performance here. Obviously, it's 10th place, not the best place, but to show that they can get eliminations for me is really important. And then we also have some Japanese teams here towards the second half as well.
Yeah, Japanese teams a little bit of a rougher time. BC Swell and also Reject are going to be out in 15th and 13th place respectively. So it got a little bit rough for a lot of the teams over to the eastern side. Yeah. And we know that when you look at the playstyle from Japanese teams for BC Swell and Reject, their playstyle is very heavily focused around placement points, about their macro. And here, unfortunately, having all of those fights stacked over to the east made it a lot harder for them to potentially try and tend towards the late game.
Well, we're starting to see our first player, our first MVP start to rise through the ranks. Sir able to get himself the #1 player at the end of the first match. And again, the funny thing is, for like the Western audience, right? I guess the English audience in general, if you're not watching Zute, obviously when doesn't watch parties for PEL, it's a lot of these names you won't really know. But it's great to see that we have some newer names coming out to light. I think this is definitely a player we have to watch out for in the long run here, especially if they can continue this momentum and continue this pace.
Yeah, I mean, Acer, especially with the position he had on Potato Hill, looking down across the positions that maybe Cryptics had, maybe a Rico Infinity team had, and things like that. He had a wide field of view to be able to greet those teams upon arrival here. So it's the perfect spot for him to effectively be a turret, Jason. So it doesn't surprise me too much that he's able to take #1 spot for this first game.
I think, Max, and just to jump in really quickly, one thing we've noticed about like Chinese teams and Chinese players in particular is that there's generally like never a weak link on a team. Every single player on a Chinese team can frag out. You have some other teams in like the Western world that kind of, they have those like in-game leaders or in-game, the callers who just can't really frag out or pick up kills. But as we saw with vonordonayt last year, like anyone can put on big numbers.
I think that's a very interesting topic, actually, because I talked about this at the start about OnlyS not being here for Tong Jiabao anymore. One of the big reasons why I wanted to cover this PMGC is because I really wanted to cover Tong Jiabao to see how OnlyS was going to play. Him not being here, I was a little bit scared for the team. I was like, how well can they perform without that star player, right? But as you said, Jason, especially when you're part of a Chinese roster, every single player is absolutely phenomenal in their own regard, if it's in terms of how they play with the entire team, how their synergy is, and also their individual mechanics are really strong, right? Yeah. And Tong Jiabao, their big weakness, I would say, when you look back on their prior tournaments, is their early game fighting, because they go for those wide spreads to get as much information as possible. They couldn't do it here, and they didn't have any early game fights. So when you make it to the late game, if they make it to the late game, which is what happened here, this is a team that can very clearly and very consistently close off games, which they showed this time around.
Also, you got to give, we talked about like top 3 teams being all from China. Top 5, we had 2 teams coming in from MENA as well. And you saw Nibba Galaxy there with Lord, where they qualified through PMGC points from Arabia. I mean, five eliminations. Like, that's fantastic. I feel like a team, like any team that's kind of not used to playing against these like Southeast Asia, Chinese, Japan, Korean teams, like there's always this kind of like fear ingrained within them of like, can we beat them when it comes head to head? Can we battle against them? But it's good to see like they have confidence, and to see Lord step out right off the gate, picking up 5 elims is fantastic.
I loved the position that Nigma had in this game, and I mean, if it hadn't been huge west shifts constantly for these Chinese teams, Nigma had a brilliant spot to be able to flex if it had been east shifts as well. So they'd situated themselves in a great spot for any eventuality. I liked it a lot.
Okay, well, to remind you guys at home that we still have obviously way more matches to go. And Max, if I'm not mistaken, you have something you wanted to show us here that happened in that first match that we're all going to talk about. Don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot. Don't freak out.
Man, okay, I thought I was alone for a second there. But yeah, we're going to have some clips that we're going to be talking out every game. And for this first clip, we're going to be talking especially about Tong Jiabao, how they were able to close off that game. And you mentioned at one point, right, Kalaris, and that 2-2 split, 2 players on Potato Hill, 2 players in School Apartment. And that worked out really well. They were able to regroup the moment they knew this circle was going to end towards Potato Hill. But Sir, that was the position that you mentioned was so strong, right? Having that big overview of what was happening inside circle really helped them to set themselves up for a successful win at the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you can see Sir in this moment is that far right-hand side logo there for Tong Jiabao. And then as these circles unfold, they understand that dealing with STE on the northern side of this circle and having that wraparound is not only going to give them a good fight against STE, but then also a good fight against any snakes There you go. Thumbs up, right? Going to third person, I feel it's easier. It gives you more opportunities, more angles to be able to look at than first person. So to work with this, and they are doing it already very successfully. This could be devastating and scary for the other teams in the regions.
I mean, Max, that was a major talking point we had last year, right? It's really hard to be aggressive in third person versus first person, which we kind of saw happen and develop over the course of PMGC last year. But to see like these three teams not really be worried or mess up or even have a second thought about it is a very scary sign for the rest of the lobby.
Yeah, I think there's also a positive value that's brought to you through third person, right? Is the fact that you can scout without putting yourself at risk. And you can see what by how H-Sir was playing for Dong Jiabao. He was scouting without ever putting himself at risk. And he was just getting information literally for free every single time. He was there for the longest time, actually. He had time to put a tag on the rock at one point. So he was really having some fun doing some painting on the side. But yeah, that third-person perspective, these Chinese teams now know exactly how to make use of it, despite maybe not being able to go as aggressive as they would like if they were playing on their own version. And man, they're using it so well. And this is just the first game, and top 3 is all Chinese teams, just as a reminder. Like, bro, okay, the other team's going to have to step up big time.
Yeah, 100% indeed. And just like last year, where we had a Chinese team take the entire event, we also have another event happening within PMGC. This year, we have our fan favorite vote happen yet again. You guys can play PUBG Mobile and vote for your favorite PMGC teams and players, and you guys get rewards for doing so. You can get a voting ticket by logging into the game. You can watch live at the Esports Center, or you can share the voting page with all of your friends, and you can go find more information from the in-game Esports Center as well. So make sure you guys do that. Make sure you guys get your millions of rewards with even various pink level permanent items only during this time. So get your predictions in, get your fan favorite votes in as well. I'm going to be logging in, doing that while when next match is started. No, after the show, because I need to pay attention. That's right, guys. We're all going to get our votes in. I don't know if we're eligible to win, but we can maybe swing it. But yeah, obviously that's going to be going on, and we've already had 3 Chinese teams take top 3. I don't want to even ask you guys. I don't want to even have you guys think about, like, will they continue to do this through the entire event? For me, it's more that first match was a feeler game, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Feel free to correct me. It was just to get an idea of like where a team's dropping, how are they playing, how can we adapt our style, and maybe it's coincidence or maybe not that it was the top 3 Chinese teams.
Yeah. It's interesting, right, Kalash, because we were talking about this quite a lot, and we expected a lot of hot drops to happen. This is a lot less all over the place than I initially expected. Like, you're looking at, for example, Yasnaya fight didn't really break out early on. You're looking at especially Pachinki, there was no hot drop happening. Xavier moved away, and Nova moved away. So it seems like teams are a lot more prepared than what I expected at the start, at least for the drop locations.
I mean, for Yasnaya, for example, DRS is in Group E, right? So of course it might not happen.
Yeah, because of that. Okay, fair enough.
It might happen. It might happen a little later on down the line, but we'll see. We'll see. I think when I look at the 3 Chinese teams getting themselves a top spot in this first game, for me, too early to call. It could just quite happily be coincidence. I mean, the West shifts, if these don't happen, maybe they're not in as good positions. Like if I'm looking over towards the East, for example, 4 Rivals had an amazing dip that they're able to take out BTR on the rotation on. If the circle shifts East, they could quite easily be in a really nice spot here to be able to kind of push further on into the game as well. So yeah, 1 game down, still too early for me, Jason.
Well, I mean, I will say this at least, like, I don't remember it. Hopefully Statman John Allen can help us with this this actual bubble for us of like what the average point we're expected to see a team have to be able to make it into our top 16 for the Super Weekend. But Dong Jiabao, I mean, they're already on pace to qualify for the first Super Weekend. Yeah. And I mean, obviously we saw last year Nova didn't qualify in a Super Weekend. They still managed to make it to the finals. But honestly, with the caliber of teams, you don't want to miss a single Super Weekend. So at least those 3 Chinese teams looking fantastic. We do have Miramar coming up next, though. And it's going to be the exact same teams. Group A, B, C, and D going to be participating yet again. And we're going to get our first little glimpse, our first little look into how these teams will perform on this map, Max.
Yeah, we got a lot of teams, though, of course. The 2 favorite maps are going to be Erangel and Miramar, regardless. So I think a lot of the teams are still going to be happy about this one. But also how the formatting works, right, is that every single team is going to play their matches back-to-back. And if you're not playing, you're not playing 2 games in a row, right? So we're going to have the exact same lobby coming into this one. So if teams are just heating up to each another a little bit more, that could help in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, if you're looking on this Miramar game, it is a team that I would like to see potentially do really well. It would be
don't do it, Max.
Okay, I'm not doing it. You know what? I'm happy you cut me. I'm not going to say it. There's one team I would like to see good, but I'm not saying it.
You are so you know. I'll take Instagram.
It's like an urge. I have to do it.
Can I interject here for a moment? I will say that Reject is a team that I'm going to be looking at coming into this first Miramar. The reason is because usually, or they have actually bailed from Picardo because FaZe has been dropping there. They've been kind of dropping split trash loot around that area a little bit. This is an opportunity for them to potentially play Picardo for one, and then maybe from that on actually get themselves some good rotations and kind of get on pace, get some points on the board before FaZe kind of comes into the lobby and messes around there. So we'll see, unless some of the teams are going to drop there.
Max, I want to hear it. Go ahead. I want to hear what you're going to talk about.
I don't know if I should now.
Do it.
I was going to say Star Wars Esports. I love how they play Miramar. I think one of my favorite teams when it comes to Miramar playstyle. But okay, they're probably going to go in 16th now. I'm sorry. I apologize. But yeah.
If that happens, Max, I'm sorry. I don't think you can ever deny the curse. If
RRQ 2.0. It's happening again.
I will say.
Well, that's what I was saying before with FaZe, because you got Beer 11 playing. I mean, he's a sub, but you know.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah. I will say as well, when it comes to Miramar, another focus of mine is obviously going to be on El Pozo. I think for a lot of people, it might end up being on El Pozo. Obviously, Daniwa as well as Nigma Galaxy over there. In a lot of the fights that I've seen these two go down there, I feel like Daniwa has been on the losing edge of that. So if they bail from there, that could be a situation we have to keep an eye on as well. But I'd be scared. I think that Nigma's already had a decent start here to the day, Max, and you don't exactly want to be Daniwa going into like a losing situation on an El Pozo.
I want to be a little bit careful here, but I mean, they got their drop of Pachinki for game one. They might get it once again here. I'm also looking at Los Leones. Los Leones, especially in the scrims, you had a lot of things happening over there. Of course, scrims don't always translate in the action.
The focus of mine is obviously going to be on El Pozo. I think for a lot of people, it might end up being on El Pozo. Obviously, Daniwa as well as Nigma Galaxy over there. In a lot of the fights that I've seen these two go down there, I feel like Daniwa has been on the losing edge of that. So if they bail from there, that could be a situation we have to keep an eye on as well. But I'd be scared. I think that Nigma's already had a decent start here to the day, Max, and you don't exactly want to be Daniwa going into like a losing situation on an El Pozo.
I want to be a little bit careful here, but I mean, they got their drop of Pachinki for game one. They might get it once again here. I'm also looking at Los Leones. Los Leones, especially in the scrims, you had a lot of things happening over there. Of course, scrims don't always translate in the actual tournament itself, but Los Leones could be contested a little bit, but it's such a wide compound that if you have two teams dropping there, as long as they're respectful from each other, it should be fine. So hopefully no hot drops. That's what I'm expecting for this one in the second game.
I wish there's more hot drops, to be honest. I wish there's more disrespect between teams just dropped on top of each other trying to get kills. I'm surprised neither of you mentioned Bigatron, though. For me, thinking of Ryzen back at PMGC last year, that like 1v3 pulled off against Footballists, like I'm expecting some potential good things out of Bigatron, especially with them having U-Boy on the roster and Liquid obviously having more time within the team. But that's all coming up. We have to head to a short little break here. When we do come back, we'll finally jump into our second match of the day.
진을 예쁘게 쳐놓긴 했는데
이거 준이 얻어. 준이.
자, 빨리 뺐어요.
워리어스. 스코어도 자, 이거 오케이가 순식간에 녹을 수 있습니다. 이거 스코어가 판을 깔아줬거든요. 워리어스. 본인들의 점수가
I saw the first light, the first steps. Now I see much more. I capture Earth in all its beauty. I see action. I see drama. And I see it in the finest detail. Moments of inspiration. And the first steps. I am the 1+9.
Lontaran Nit ke bahagian hadapan, tapi itulah dia Free Fire yang ditunggu dengan begitu sabar sekali oleh Riz. Mungkin akan berharapkan impian Team Secret. Team Secret terkeluar di tempat yang ke-8 dengan ini telah pun diketahui. pun cuba untuk masuk daripada bahagian belakang, tapi datang pada gangguan daripada jumper. In the wrong direction, Zaxi aiming out for the grenade. Can he get the whole team wide here for Gigfan?
Rule number 2, here we have it.
Looking out really tough for you, Hog, getting 70k. MR5 is down as well, that is unique.
Close one there by pubgm. Ooh, another one coming in from damn root. Can he finish off pubgm? Pubgm now 50% health. Pubgm is actually being shot at. Where is he gonna go? Oh no! Pubgm! Pubgm! And he goes down.
Early on as Frederick Yango Galacticos moving into the corner of the container, and Tamio gets taken down.
Hello, di manakah QB berada? Bombs langsung aja.
Bahkan ada sebuah ledakan, ada sebuah bagi yang juga loncat tadi kita melihat, dan itu dia Genesis Dogma memulangkan semua pemain dari V Gaming.
โลแกนโชว์ความเก่าครับแล้วนี่เรียบร้อยครับเป็นทางด้านโลแกนครับที่ค่อนข้างที่จะเก่ากว่านะช็อตนี้แล้วมียานขาดทิ้งต้องการต้องปั๊มวงเหนียนไปสิ APDR กิ๊กแฟนโดนหนีสุดแล้วดึงตอนนี้เก็บโอกี้ไปแล้วเหลือแค่ตัวโดนไฟ2เลยมีลาตัวเย็นน้องรักมีเรื่องซูเปอร์มาก็เช็คชื่อครับโอ้โหเอาได้แล้วบอลไฟหนอนเป็นเกียรติแล้วก่อนหน้านี้โดนล้อมอย่างไกลๆขอแค่เม็ดเดียวพอแค่เม็ดเดียวล่วงไปจังหวะนี้3 ปอมเป็นเกมได้ไม่ทำได้แต่เพื่อนเขามาเทปได้เหมือนกันแล้วไม่เอานอนแบบนี้เรียบร้อยเลยเป็น4 2 แต้ม
Ada kedudukan yang cantik. Kita lihatkan tim secret di bagian high ground tersebut, tapi Nerpeko dengan satu pemanduan yang begitu. Oh ya, mungkin dia memang confirm secret pula. Confirm Malaysia menyerupai daripada tim EVOS.
All been leading up to this, and it's continued along here in day 1 of the PMGC 2021 East League, as these teams are fighting, these 20 teams are fighting at least today and tomorrow to get top 16, to make it into the Super Weekend, and to make those points stick around until we get into our league finals. Maxman and Claris can be joining me here still on the desk. And gentlemen, well, we've had our top few Chinese teams finish off our first match of the day. As we head into our second match, Claris, you pointed out something to me that you've noticed when it comes to Miramar between two teams, the Xavier and Deadeye guys. You want to talk about their drop location and potentially an early fight, but it's not where you would expect it.
Maybe. So it's very interesting because normally when you're thinking about like hot drop situations, it's again not hot drop, just a conflicting drop spot situation. You're thinking as they continue to regroup and kind of get together. Then go on and interesting to see a trash drop be conflicted, Max. It's not common that happens, Max, but it's definitely something here that can potentially be a concern.
Makes me think of that meme when you have a pack of dogs fighting over the pile of trash. Like, it's worth it, and we're just gonna fight over it right there. But to be honest, I don't think, especially when you have that much space remaining, I don't expect any team to go out that early. But the main issue with those kind of skirmishes happening that early is you lose a player, you lose potentially even 2 players, and your chances of a chicken dinner drop drastically when you lose players that early, especially on the Miramar game. So just got to be careful. You can both drop there if you want, but you just got to be respectful of where the other team drops to make sure you don't have that big skirmish happen as you try and regroup together.
I think what I find interesting, because I'm kind of looking at like the macro, like the bigger picture here, is that you have A, B, C, D playing the first 2 matches of the day, and then Group E comes into the 3rd match, right? The question for me is, if you're Group E, you have the chance to watch these first 2 matches and see where teams are dropping. Do you think teams might potentially change their drop location when they see, okay, well, you know, Bigatron's dropping here, so, and that's where we like to drop, but we don't want to contest them early on? I feel like they have some sort of advantage for that fact, but also they might psych themselves out, you know, underplaying how well they could combat some of these teams.
I think myself and Kalaris touched upon this quite a bit actually before the show, that yes, if you are Group E, you have so much extra knowledge from watching these 2 first games. You only have a Miramar and Erangel right now, so you have 1 game of each already in the backlog. You can watch back on how things went down, and you can potentially change the drop location if there's a need to do so. Even though that's a very big change, I don't expect teams to maybe go that far, but you might tweak a few things here and there to make sure that you have an even better chance in that early game to get yourself in a good position. So yeah, Group E, entering in game number 3, and then the rest of the games throughout this first league stage, it could be a little bit of an advantage for them for sure.
I think that kind of frustrates me though a little bit, Claris. Like, thinking about battle royals in general, teams are very hesitant to hot drop each other, very hesitant to like change the locations because they feel like, no, this is our spot, this is where we know to play from. But I feel like if you're a team coming into this, you have to have, okay, this is our first plan, this is our first drop location.
Yeah.
You have to have like two more potential backups because you can't afford to really have any bad days here.
Yeah, that was the concern I think we had for some of the other PMPLs, which was some teams didn't really have a good backup drop. And there are some decent places to go. We were talking about the trash drops before, and those can quite easily accommodate a lot of teams given the loot rules, given the loot settings and things like that. So, I mean, even what we were talking about with rejects, if FaZe is in the lobby, if FaZe is in Picado, the trash drop south of Picado is a perfectly viable drop. But even if somebody's dropping there, you can take, you know, east side of this map and still have rotation paths available to you. So yeah, you need to be accommodating for a lot of factors, and backup drops are very important if you get in a tight bind.